welcome to today. And today we're going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to read you a story from this amazing book called the Jesus Storybook Bible by Sally Lloyd-Jones. And it's a story that you will probably be familiar with, that you might know, but I want you to listen really carefully because it takes us right back to the beginning of our story, our journey with God. And you know, when you watch a film, if you miss the beginning of the film or you start a book and you don't read the first chapter, it's really hard to know exactly what's going on. You can't work out the plot and understand who's important and really get to know what's happening. So I really want to encourage you to listen carefully to this amazing story. She writes it beautifully. She starts with some verses from Psalm 19, and she says, "The heavens are singing about how great God is, and the skies are shouting it out. Day after day, night after night, they are speaking to us." And there she's talking about how everything in our world declares how amazing God is. I love you, he wrote it in the sky and on the earth and under the sea. He wrote his message everywhere in his world to reflect him like a mirror, to show us what he's like, to help us know him. Now what this means, children, is when we go in the bush and we see a majestic lion or we see a beautiful impala, we get a glimpse of what God is like. He's powerful, he's creative, he loves beauty. When we see our kitten chasing its tail and going round and round and we laugh and we enjoy it, we see a little bit of God's heart to have joy and laughter, and he loves to bring pleasure to us as well. And if you're in the bush and you see the cosmos, those wild flowers just growing, we understand that God makes all things and they're intricate and they're beautifully made. That gives us a little idea of who God is and what he's created for us. But he didn't just write it out there in the world, in creation. He wrote it in words, and that's what this is all about. Now, some of you think the Bible is full of rules telling you what you must do and what you mustn't do. And the Bible certainly has some rules in it, doesn't it? They show us how life works best. The Bible isn't mainly about you and what you should be doing, though. It's about God and what he has done. Other people think the Bible is a book of heroes, showing you people you should copy, who you must be like. And the Bible does have some heroes in it, and we've talked about them, haven't we, over the last few months. But most of the people in the Bible we realize aren't really heroes after all. They make mistakes. They get things wrong. Sometimes they can be quite mean, or they run away from things that they know they should be doing. No, the Bible isn't a book of rules, and it isn't a book of heroes. The Bible is most of all a story. It's an adventure story of a young man who comes from a far country to win back his lost treasure. It's a love story about a brave prince who leaves his palace, his throne, everything to rescue the ones he loves. It's the most wonderful of fairy tales that has come true in real life. You see, the best thing about this story is that it's true. There are lots of stories in the Bible, but all of them, and we've seen this, haven't we, children? All of them are telling one big story. The story of how God loves his children and comes to rescue them. It takes the whole Bible, all of this, to tell the story. But at the center of it all, there's a baby. Every story in the Bible whispers his name, as you've seen. He's like the missing piece of a puzzle, the piece that makes all the other pieces fit together, and suddenly you see this picture. And this is no ordinary baby. This is the child upon whom everything would depend. This is the child who one day, but wait, I said we're doing the beginning of the story. So let's go to the beginning. Now, as some of you know, in the beginning there was nothing. Nothing to hear. Nothing to feel. Nothing to see. Only emptiness and darkness. But God was there. And God had a wonderful plan. I'm going to take this emptiness, God said, and I'm going to fill it up. Out of the darkness, I'm going to make light. Out of everything, out of nothing, I'm going to make everything. Like a mummy bird flutters her wings over her eggs to help her chicks hatch, God hovered over the deep, silent darkness. He was making life happen. And God spoke. That's all he did. God spoke. And whatever he said happened. Light, darkness, sea, sky, oceans, mountains, flowers, everything, everywhere burst into life. Stars, sun, moon, fiery globes whizzing across in the darkness. Birds, fish, animals growling, wobbling, grunting, snarling, snapping, snorting, and God saw all that he had made, and he loved them. And they were lovely, they were beautiful. But God saved the best for last.
Yeah!
From the beginning, God had a wonderful dream in his heart. He would make people to share his home. They would be his children, and the world would be their perfect home. So God breathed life into Adam and Eve. When they opened their eyes, the first thing they ever saw was God's face. And when God looked at them, he was like a new dad. And children, I can tell you that moment, I can still see it when I saw my baby for the first time. The love, I fell in love with her. She was beautiful. And when God looked at his children that he just created, he said, "You look like me. You are the most beautiful thing I have ever created." And God loved them with all his heart. And Adam and Eve joined in the song of the stars and the streams and the mountains and the wind, the wonderful song of love to the one who had made them. Their hearts were full. Nothing ever made them sad. They weren't lonely. They weren't afraid. God looked at everything he had made, and it was perfect. But nothing compared to how much he loved his children. He would move heaven and earth to be near them. Always, whatever happened, whatever it cost him, he would always love them. And so it was, the wonderful story began. Adam and Eve lived happily together in their beautiful new home, and everything was perfect for a while. Until the day when everything went wrong. God had a horrible enemy. His name was Satan. You can say boo when I say Satan. Satan had once been the most beautiful angel. But he didn't want to just be an angel. He wanted to be God. He grew proud and evil and full of hate. And God had to send him out of heaven. Satan was seething with anger and looking for a way he could hurt God. He wanted to stop God's plan, stop this love story right there. So Satan disguised himself as a snake, and he waited in the garden. Now God had given Adam and Eve only one rule. Don't eat from the fruit on that tree, God told them, because if you do, you'll think you know everything. You'll stop trusting me, and death and sadness and tears will come. You see, God knew if they ate the fruit, they would think they didn't need him, and they would try to make themselves happy without him. and life without him isn't happy at all. But Adam and Eve listened to the lies of Satan, and they did the one thing God had asked them not to. And suddenly everything changed. A chill was in the air. Something strange was happening. They'd always been naked, but now naked felt wrong. And they didn't want to see anyone. So they hid. Later that evening, as God was walking in his garden, he called to them, "Children." Usually Adam and Eve loved to hear God's voice and would run to him, but this time they ran away. They hid from him. They hid in the shadows. "Where are you?" God called. "Hiding," Adam said. "We're afraid of you." "Did you eat the fruit I told you not to eat?" God asked, and a terrible pain came into God's heart. His children hadn't just broken the one rule. They had broken God's heart. They hadn't believed him. They hadn't trusted him. After all he'd done, after all he'd given them, and he knew now that they would have to live apart from him, and that everything else would start to break. God's creation would start to come undone. Everything was going to go wrong, and everything was going to start to die. And he'd meant it for life. You see, sin had come into God's perfect world, and it would never leave. God's children would always be running away from him and hiding in the dark. Their hearts would break now and would never properly heal. But God wouldn't let his children live forever, not in such pain, not without him. There was only one way to protect them. "You will have to leave the garden now," God told his children, his eyes filling with tears. "This is no longer your home. It is not the place for you to live." But before they left the garden, because he still loved them, God made clothes for his children to cover them. He gently put the clothes on them and sent them on a long, long journey out of the garden, out of their home. And in any other story, children, that would be it. That would be the end of the story. There would be nothing else. But God loved his children. He loves us too much to let the story end there. Even though he would suffer, God had a plan, a magnificent dream. One day, he would get his children back. He would battle Satan. Boom! He would battle sin and darkness and sadness, and he would rescue his children. One day, he would make a perfect home again, and one day, he would wipe away every tear. You see, no matter what, in spite of everything, God would love his children forever and ever and ever and ever. And they would forget him, and they would keep running from him. But deep in their hearts, God knew that his children would miss him, that they would long for him, that they would know that there was something not right, and he would bring them back to him. And we know, children, don't we? That is the story of the rest of the Bible. And so, children, we are on the other side of that story of the Garden in Eden. We know about Jesus and the cross and the resurrection, that Jesus came back to life. But I really want you to remember the beginning. Because in the beginning, God made you in his image. He made you perfectly, and he loved you. You know, when Adam and Eve sinned, God didn't, he called out, but he knew where they were. He's God. He knew what they'd done, but still he longed to be in relationship with them. And he didn't say, "Get away from me. I hate you. What have you done?" He was sad. His heart was broken, but he still called to them. He wanted to talk to them. He wanted to help them. He covered them with clothes. And when God looks at us now, because of what Jesus has done, and he's covered our sin, and he's taken our shame and our guilt, and when God looks at us, he sees Jesus, we don't have to run away. We don't have to hide. And when we mess up and we do things wrong, we don't have to feel shame and just like the end of the world, we can go to him. He's still calling us. He wants to talk to us. He wants us to tell us what's happened, and he wants to heal us. And that's the beautiful story that we read over and over again in the Bible, of God showing his people, come back to me. Come, I love you. So children, remember that this week as you go about what you're doing. There's nothing you can do that will make God love you more. And there's nothing you can do that will stop him loving you, because Jesus has paid the price and there's no barrier now. So it's a brilliant, brilliant lesson for us all to remember. Go and play a game of hide and seek, and remember you can't hide from God. He knows where you are and he longs to be with you. Do the craft that we're putting on the parent group, and have a really, really great day. God bless.